Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Benjy Sherer. Benjy is a personal transformation coach and author who guides people to emotional mastery. Benjy bridges the gap between psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. Those three realms are all intrinsically connected in Benjy's approach to self-love and emotional mastery. Growing up with a deep existential need for answers, Benjy's academic background was in philosophy and world religions, but the academic search left him pessimistic at the soul level about our ultimate role in this universe and the purpose of life. It wasn't until after a dark night of soul and spiritual awakening of his own that he was forced to dive deep into his inner healing in order to rediscover his true purpose and learn the skills, tools, and techniques that he teaches to clients today. Benjy teaches people how to connect directly with emotions and sensations of their body without fear, guilt, or shame, and allows these feelings to run through them so they can be truly released. It's about building emotional muscle, not seeking rational answers. So please welcome to the show, Benjy Sherer. Benjy, thank you so much for being here today. I look forward to our conversation.
Same here, Bob. I've been thinking about this for a while. I've been looking forward to it. I think we've got a great topic on hand, and I'm really honored to be able to be here and share some thoughts and some wisdom with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much again. Well, if we can, let's tell the audience about you. How did you get to where you are today? Because that's in the intro, in your bio, you went through some dark things, some dark times. Tell us how you got to where you are today.
Well, I mean, that's definitely a long story. If we're going to get into everything. I mean, realistically, what was really interesting is the more that I started branching out into this field and really connecting with this work that I'm doing, the more it became obvious that this is what I've been training for my whole life. So the really short answer is that this is me. This is, I believe that we all come into this life with a certain blueprint, something that is uniquely us that we are here to share. And my whole life, I struggled with this notion that I knew and I felt like I was here to do something and here to share something. But until, for lack of a better expression, a spiritual awakening of sorts, it seemed kind of insane to think that about yourself, when you're living a completely 3D life and you're really just judging your life based on three-dimensional things, based on what's happening in your life, sort of thing. It seems kind of insane to have this idea of purpose, of mission, of whatever. So there's a large part of me that was struggling with it this whole time. And I was constantly trying to run away from this wisdom, from this responsibility, from this duty that I had, and just trying to live a much more regular life. And then so there were a few shifts that kind of happened. I'd say about probably like 7-8 years ago at this point, I was actually in law school. And I ended up there the way that, a lot of like, what does a good Jewish boy with a background in philosophy
Go to law school.
I guess I'll like, I had given up on certain things that I had a lot of passion for. I had been beat down into quote unquote reality by the world that was trained to like, look, not everyone gets to do what they love. You kind of just got to pick something, you got to do it. And so after a few years in law school, my heart wasn't having it. I couldn't do it. I got to a point where I was so depressed and so anxious that I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. So I dropped out of law school on the drop of a hat. Like I couldn't do it anymore. And I started branching back towards some passions. So I was I got back into music. I built a recording studio that was designed to help emerging artists get off the ground. And I started really developing myself. I started learning how to become the truest version of myself in that realm. And, it brought out a lot of my passions, and it brought out a great motivation for, I don't exactly love the phrase self-improvement, but it brought that up. And so I was working very hard on myself and towards mission and towards purpose. And I found myself in the artist's world, the artist lifestyle. And I found one group of people, which I'm not going to get into the stories of it now, but where for the first time in my life, I felt like I was at home. I finally thought that I found the people that I could connect to, that I could relate to, that I could be my truest self around. But what I didn't realize at the time was that these people were very much still stuck in their own darkness. So whereas I was in that sort of world because I was learning how to be my truest self, many of them were in that world because they were doing their best to hide their truest selves.
Okay.
And because I didn't recognize that, it created this cycle of emotional abuse that sent me completely off the rails, that completely tore my life apart, because basically what was happening was I was doing nothing but, expressing myself and being love and being light and trying to help people and all of this. But I have this sort of trait of pushing people to be their truest selves, whether I know it or not. It's just something about the way that I interact, the way that I talk, the way that I deal with people. And I didn't realize that I was doing that. They didn't exactly realize that I was doing it, but they didn't like it. So I was just trying to shine my brightest self. I was just trying to express myself and help the world and be whatever. And it really irked them. So they would they would say things like, we love you and your family and you're one of us, while energetically, emotionally, and psychologically pushing me away. And I didn't realize that any of this was happening. So I kept on trying harder and harder and harder to earn their approval. And they kept on pushing me away while pretending like they weren't. So that was the cycle of kind of emotional abuse that triggered my dark night of the soul. It triggered this period of intense depression that forced me to learn how to heal my emotions, to learn how to be my true self, to learn how to see through these psychological defense mechanisms that I had been using throughout my whole life. And at the same time, to start recognizing it in others, not in a judgmental way, but more in the sense that I started seeing how all of us are just like, we've all been asleep our whole lives, basically operating on these fear-based defense mechanisms that we have built up throughout our lives to protect ourselves from the pain that we once or often experienced when being our truest selves. This is trauma and pain that 99.99999% of the world is living with. We have all tried to express ourselves at one time or another, whether to family or friends or spouses or whatever, and been put down for it. And we were trained to put on this mask, to put on these emotional defense mechanisms, and to do whatever we could to survive in this world. So we chose the path of 3D kind of stability over true emotional self-expression. And that's where most of us live.
And it's interesting you talk about that, because like you said, so many of us have that. We all carry around, if you will, a bag of rocks of stuff we've lived through. So in focusing on the ability, because you've helped come out of that, you've come out of that yourself, you help others come out of that area in your work. On a more positive note, how is a positive mindset, does that help with those steps? I mean, it's not the only answer, obviously, because there's a lot of work with these feelings and some of that, but how does positivity fit into those equations of those dark moments or that heaviness that people may be carrying?
So I think that, and this is, I think, the main topic that we really wanted to dive into here, which is the positive mindset. It's absolutely a necessity for healing this stuff. But I think what a lot of people miss is we tend to look at our lives, from this neutral stance. Like when we're living in, our fear-based defense mechanisms, we look at that as, zero. Like there's negative on one side, positive on the other side. And that place where we've been living our whole lives, that's the 0 point. And we think of this element of positivity as we're going to add something positive to the place where we're already at. But what we're missing in that, and what I was just referring to in my whole story there, is that we're not actually in a neutral place there where we're living our whole lives. We're actually in negativity the whole time. So this positive mindset isn't, it's not just some happy-go-lucky kind of thing that we're going to add to our neutral state. It's we have been living our whole lives in negative cycles that we didn't realize were going on. And in order to escape them, we're going to need to start shifting that spiral.
Right.
So we've always been responding to our pain, and that is the negative thought process and the negativity that we live in. And we need to start adapting the opposite so that we can stop fueling the negative patterns that we've been in the whole time.
Right. And that's part of, you see commercialism, you see, network TV, that's what they feed on, is that negativity, that pessimism, that fear, if you will, and shifting those emotions, shifting our actions to those positive actions, positive ideas. That will give you strength, because you start to replay events in your mind and you realize, wait, I've done that before. I can do this again. Yeah. And it's not Pollyanna. Positive thoughts, positive mindset does help, a lot of people get through many things. I spoke to another person on another podcast about aging and the idea of positive mindset. This is going to happen. We're going to age. We're going to get older. But how do you look at things? How are you looking at where you're at? It does have good effects, and it's not just hokey pokey, if you will, of woo-woo talk, if you will. It does make a difference. How has that worked in your life, if you can give some examples of that?
Okay, well, I think that so one of the main things that I talk about a lot is the distinction between whether life is happening to you versus happening for you. And a lot of this requires a bit of a higher perspective on our lives. We tend to be in the middle of everything that's happening, but when you can take an observer's perspective of your life and look at this from an outsider's point of view and sort of recognize that the goal of life is often not what we think when we're in the middle of this scenario, that, I very much believe that we come to Earth to learn, to grow, to evolve. And when we're in this negative mind state, we take every one of our challenges from this victim mentality, from like, oh, this thing is happening to me and there's nothing that I can do about it. And it just keeps us going in these cycles. But when you can understand that, like, look, the challenge that I'm facing right now might be getting in the way of what I think I want right now, but it might also be absolutely preparing me for what I really want, what my soul really wants, what my heart really wants. For those of it, like, even I get a little caught up on spiritual language sometimes. What the heart really wants, I think, is a little more appropriate. When we can understand that from this higher perspective, that maybe this thing that I'm aiming at right now is less important than what my heart knows is more important in the grand scheme of things, then we can approach every one of our challenges from this different perspective and from this different mindset. And, when it comes to the sort of the practical element of the activity, which is what you were just saying, it's not hokey, it's not woo-woo stuff. There is a practical element of how this all works, because, as I've been saying, we've been living our lives in this state of negativity. And that then creates certain cycles. It creates certain patterns, and it affects the way that we choose to engage with anything that's happening. And to put it as simply as possible, it's very obvious that someone who's walking around all day long thinking that the world is out to get him or her is not going to jump on certain opportunities. They're not going to form certain connections. They're going to look at every opportunity as just something awful. And so you're not going to have that conversation. You're not going to jump on an opportunity. You're not going to take that job. You're not going to, like, the example that I like to use is, if you believe that you are always going to be poor. For
Right.
example, not that wealth is important, but like, let's just say you truly believe at your core that you are always going to be poor.
Right.
Then when the opportunity for wealth comes along, you're not going to take that chance because like it's a pipe dream. It's ridiculous. They're just selling me whatever. Like it's not real. But if you believe that wealth is your destiny, then you're always at every moment going to be looking for that opportunity.
Right.
Where is that chance? How am I going to do it? So you're going to take opportunity after opportunity. And when one of them doesn't work out, you're not going to say, oh, well, that was a failure and that was terrible and this is never going to work. You're going to see it as like, okay, well, what did I learn from that experience? How can I take it into the next one and into the next one, into the next one, until you finally sort of pass that hump and things start falling into place.
And that's a great point you bring up, because it's that repetition that helps you set that in your mind that these actions, these positive actions, will get you positive results. It may not be today, but it will be eventually the case that you will have positive results, because it takes time to learn. When we first rode a bike, we didn't just jump on the bike and ride it down the street. I got scars on my knees still probably from that, but we all, when we learn to walk, the same thing. A baby doesn't just get up and start running a 5K. They toddle, they fall down, they look around to see if anybody's watching, and then if nobody is, they get up and try it again. It's that repetition, those small steps that you keep going after to positive actions, to build that in your mind that you can do these things. And then there's a matter of recall for your mind to overcome, like you said, those negative inputs of, oh, that won't work or that didn't work. But wait, something in there did. Let's try that piece and then add it to this other piece I just learned from this experience. And that's how we grow that muscle. That's how we grow our actions. That's how we grow our positive results. It's interesting that, you talk about that piece of coming from a dark place, because I think that's important for people to understand. We all have scenarios like this, whether it's a death in the family or a tragic event that could have happened to you, or financial woes that have occurred in your life, whatever it may be. Whatever we determine is that dark moment, we can come out of. It's interesting that I was looking through some of your information on your website, and you referenced something that sounded like Tony Robbins, how things should pass. And he always says, this too shall pass. Is that some of the people you've studied, Tony Robbins or any of the, others like that?
I definitely came across Tony Robbins a bit in my studies. I never fully, I have nothing but respect for him and what he's doing. Mm-hmm. He never quite resonated with me as the guide that I needed. There have definitely been people, really honestly, I don't think there's anyone that has truly resonated with me as that coach and that leader that I needed, which is, I think, actually what makes me such a powerful coach in the first place, is that I'm sharing my blueprint. I always consider, I'm sure there's a Japanese term for this that I never found, but I always considered myself as a student without a master. I spent my whole life reaching out to different people when I was in university, or when I was such as in all places, I was looking for that mentor, that coach, and I was never able to really find one. So Tony Robbins and a bunch of there were a lot of coaches that they helped me a lot for a month or 2 or 3. And then I kind of outgrew them, and I'm like, okay, I really get some of their points, but it's not quite perfect for me. And when you mentioned this topic of this too shall pass, I think that definitely is, it's a very important concept that a lot of people need to understand. And it's again, not this kind of hokey sort of just sit down and wait for whatever to pass. But we need to understand that there's this kind of emotional spectrum, or think about it like emotional weather. Every day the weather is changing, and there are times, and this sort of plays into the negative thought cycles that I was referring to before, that there are going to be times when you just sometimes you go to bed feeling great. You're optimistic about life and everything's feeling good. And then you wake up in the morning and you're stressed and you're worried and you're afraid for absolutely no reason. There's just this uncomfortable feeling somewhere inside of you. Mm-hmm. And that's often partly just because emotional weather is always changing. There's your thoughts, your emotions, and your sensations. These are all sort of independent systems. And your emotions, sometimes you wake up, you're feeling a little down, you're in that space. And our habit in those moments is to ask ourselves, wait a minute, what's wrong right now? So you wake up, you're feeling a little worried, or you're feeling a little stressed. Maybe you just had a bad dream, or maybe you just woke up in the wrong state of a REM cycle, or maybe it's just whatever. There are a million reasons, but we wake up and we're not feeling so good. And we ask ourselves this question of, okay, wait a minute, what's the problem here? Where is this coming from? And the thing is, a lot of the times, there is no real problem. You went to bed feeling great. There were no problems 12 hours ago, but now all of a sudden you wake up and there's a problem. So you start asking yourself, what is the problem right now? And even though there is no real problem, your brain starts jumping into action. It starts doing the job that you trained it to do throughout your lifetime, because this is how you've trained yourself to respond to distress, to respond to emotional discomfort. Is you're going to search for the problem so that you can have something to solve. The problem, though, is that if there is no specific real problem, and you ask yourself, where is the problem? Right. What do you think your brain's going to do? It's going to find a problem. Yeah. Absolutely. It's going to pick on your finances. It's going to pick on your relationships. It's going to pick on your job. It's going to tell you all of the potential reasons why you might be feeling bad right now. And now you have all these reasons to feel bad. So that creates more thoughts. And those thoughts that you now have because you were searching for an answer create that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach, or that tightness in your chest that's very uncomfortable and very distressful. And that creates more emotions, and that creates more thoughts, and that creates more sensations. And around and around and around we go, all because we were desperately trying to stay in control of emotional weather. Right. Which is like, if you try and stop it from raining, you're going to drive yourself insane. Yeah. But if you allow yourself to just recognize, oh, it's raining right now, so I'm going to enjoy the day inside, and I'm going to, listen to the rainfall. It's going to be beautiful until I know that it's going to be sunny again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. That is the practical element of positive thinking. And I apologize if maybe I skirted your actual question about Tony Robbins and brought it back.
No, that's interesting. You took it in that route because, as I'm thinking when you were talking about that, every day the sun comes up. It may be behind clouds. It may be, not seen that closely, but it's still there. And every day we have the opportunity to, instead of waking up and saying, yeah, what's wrong? Why not say, hey, what's right? I woke up. That's a good start. Okay. We can shift our statement to ourselves. I think that has a big factor in what you're talking about, because you just explained it so well, that emotional weather, we wake up and we go right to the negative. And that spiral, you explained it, dude. And man, my chest was tightening up as you kept talking about it. It's like, no, we don't want to do this. Let's go positive. Let's focus on what's right. Okay. I woke up. I heard the alarm clock. Take that advantage and run with it. We have the opportunity to get out of bed if we have to. Those are great thoughts. It was interesting you talked about that. So thank you for sharing that. It's a good way to do it.
My pleasure.
Now, some of the things that are always interesting, you mentioned emotional stability and how that strength, and we've mentioned this a little bit. The positive mindset that helps to build that, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely all connected, but I think that, this brings up another point that I did want to touch on at a certain point, that when it comes to this positive mindset, or this positivity that we're trying to ingrain within ourselves, it goes beyond the thoughts and the words and the forms of what we are thinking. And this is, I think, a big problem, that it's not just about positivity when it comes to emotional healing and trauma healing, or just, emotional stability in general.
Right.
People tend to focus on the superficial form of this, which is our thoughts, the actual words that we're saying. But when we are practicing, let's say positive affirmations, which are a very powerful thing, a lot of people don't get the real benefit of this, because they're just practicing the words. They're just saying these words over and over and over, not recognizing that the real strength here is in the emotions that you are cultivating within yourself through these words. The words are just forms. They're meaningless. Like if you're walking around all day really negative and depressed and, like very pessimistic, but saying the words, I love myself and I'm beautiful. I love myself and I'm beautiful. But you're saying it with this energy of the world is out to get me and everything is terrible, then it's not going to have any real effect. Right. So this is why people look at positivity and affirmations as woo-woo spiritual nonsense, because they think that those of us who are advocates of this are trying to, like, we're selling you a magic spell, that if you say these words over and over and over, that it's going to bring in just like, oh, the universe is going to come and dump a truck of gold in front of your house. Like, no, what we're trying to do is cultivate more positive emotions within us, so that when we are confronted with challenges, when we're confronted with people who are being rude or belligerent or who don't understand us, or just all sorts of struggles in our lives, we
will have them.
Exactly. So that when these things happen, we don't just slip into that victim mentality and allow life to happen to us. Instead, we have this better perspective of, wait a minute, there must be some lesson here. There must be some way that I can turn this around, or just this higher emotion inside of you with which to then take the next set of actions.
Well, it gives you a type of control. I think that's important, because like you said, you can go positive, you can go negative. We don't have a problem. Our mind can do negative in the blink of an eye. It's a positive piece that we've got to build that strength, and we've got to deter ourselves. It's just like any faith. You have to focus on, the words, you have to focus on the faith, you have to focus on the goodness of it. The same thing with positivity. You have to focus on what you get out of it. Negativity gives you a cramp in your stomach, gives you a heartache, gives you headaches. You don't feel good. Why is that a good thing? Let's focus on the other. Smile, allow yourself to smile. Is it always easy? No. There's times where I don't want to smile, but you know what? You use less muscles when you smile than when you frown.
So, okay. So here's, I think we might disagree here, branch out in different directions. I kind of disagree with that idea of, when I don't feel like smiling, I should smile kind of thing. Right. We're not trying to force, like there is such a thing as toxic positivity, where we're not allowing ourselves to feel down at any given time. That's not what this is about. We're not trying to pretend like life is all sunshine, puppy dogs, and rainbows. It's about not allowing these negative cycles to take over. And emotional healing from trauma, by the way, which is, a lot of what I teach people, we need to allow ourselves to feel the discomfort. So when there is this pain trying to run through us, that is actually a healing moment. It's this unresolved emotion from the past that's trying to come up. And in order to heal it, you need to feel it. It's this unresolved emotion that never had its opportunity to fully run through you, to fully be felt, to fully be expressed. And there is this element of toxic positivity where people hear this like, oh, I have to keep a positive mindset, which means that I'm not allowed to think negative thoughts, or I'm not allowed to feel bad for a moment. And that keeps a lot of people stuck. But that's really not what this is all about. It's about taking a higher perspective so that we can turn things around. It's about, even, for example, seeing the positive elements of experiencing pain, experiencing emotional discomfort. Like I said, allowing yourself to feel this sadness that didn't have its opportunity to work its way through you before is a beautiful and amazing experience. So it doesn't mean that you're going to pretend that you're not feeling sad in that moment. It means that you're going to allow yourself to feel sad, but not let that sadness take over towards this negative thought cycle where everything is terrible and everything's always going to be terrible. It's more about allowing yourself to be in that moment and recognizing, like, okay, in this moment of emotional distress, I get to feel it and heal it in a space and in a sense where I'm not in danger. I can't be hurt by this anymore.
Yeah. And that's a great clarification because, yeah, by no means do I mean, positivity is going to clear up everything, because you make a great point. We have to feel those feelings and emotions, and that allowance of it gets it out of your system, if you will. It passes it through. Like you said, you're I don't know if you realize subconsciously maybe that you're talking about flushing that out, passing it through, getting those negative emotions out. And thanks for that clarification, because that's a great scenario that people want to realize is things are going to happen to us. We're guaranteed that. And good, bad, indifferent, but they're going to happen. And like you said, that feeling of that emotion and realizing, I love your idea of the, taking the, a higher look at your emotions, that third person point of view. I talked to kids previously and talked about that with baseball teams. As a parent, you look at things from a different perspective, like a helicopter perspective. So you can see above the bushes and they're going down this path and where it's going to end up. But sometimes they don't want to listen to you. And they're going to experience things that you don't necessarily want them to experience, but you understand where they're going. And I appreciate that input you have about feeling your emotions, being that higher version of yourself, so you can look at them and see the value you get out of these paths you're taking.
Yeah. There's something I think that people really need to understand about unresolved emotions and about, the pain that we carry around with us. So you actually referenced, you mentioned before about, all of these rocks that you're carrying. And I do actually use a very specific example of how every moment of emotional distress that we experience that we didn't deal with properly is like you picking up a rock and putting it into your backpack. So it's like every moment of emotional distress that you deal with and express and release, it's like you pick up the rock and you put it right back down. But our whole lives, when we didn't have the freedom and the safety to feel and express our emotions in the moment of trauma, which usually we don't, because in a moment of trauma, you're not safe. At least emotionally. Maybe you're not safe physically also. Maybe you're not safe psychologically, but you're certainly not safe emotionally to express the pain that is running through you. So instead of letting it out through, let's say, crying or through screaming or through expressing yourself, which is your body's natural way of dealing with these problems, instead of dealing with it in that natural way, you put it aside. So, and you tell yourself in that moment, it's like your heart is sending you up this pain. And in the moment, you don't know how to deal with it. So you tell your heart, okay, hold on to it, put it in the backpack, and I'm going to come back and deal with this later. The problem, though, is that we don't realize that, and we never come back to deal with it later. So over our lifetimes, we've been putting rock after rock after rock in the bag, and they're small rocks, really. So when there's one rock in the bag, you don't notice. When there's 5 rocks in the bag, you don't notice, 10 rocks, whatever. But now you're 35, 40, 50 years old, and your bag is filled with rocks, and you can't even move. And now is when you finally realize, oh, wait a minute. There's a whole lifetime's worth of rocks that I'm carrying around. And the reason why I like to use that example is because what most people are doing is it's a very analytical sort of intellectual way of trying to deal with their pain. They're trying to analyze every one of these rocks. They're trying to understand, okay, where did I pick up that rock? Why did I pick it up? Why am I holding on to it? But if you're carrying a backpack that weighs 150 pounds, and I explain to you exactly why you're carrying that backpack, it still weighs 150 pounds. You're still carrying it around. The only way to overcome this stuff is to let each one of those rocks do what it needed to do the first time around. You need to let it run through you. And that has nothing to do with an intellectual analysis of this. It's one by one. You're going to take the rock out of your bag. You're going to put it back down on the ground. And you don't need to understand exactly where that rock came from in order to do it.
Thank you for that, because my backpack feels lighter right now. I appreciate that. Well, that is some good information, Benjy. I really appreciate you sharing that with our audience. Where can people find out more about you in your book and what you're doing?
Okay, well, I think the best place for people to start is I've got two books out. That the one that I think most people should start with is called Feelings First Shadow Work, which actually deal like that title is exactly what we were just talking about. It's feelings first. We don't need to intellectualize it. We don't need to analyze it. We need to confront our feelings. And as we learn to do that, the rest is going to fall into place on its own. You're going to get the answer that you need as you go. Anyways, so Feelings First Shadow Work. People can look that up. They'll find it on Amazon or all sorts of places, or they can find it on my website, benjysherercoaching.com/FF FF is Feelings First. Over there, they'll be able to get that book. They can get my second book also, which is 10 Mind Hacks for Quicker Emotional Healing. If they get it from my website, they're going to get some guided meditations and some other bonuses along with it. So that's where they can find me.
That's awesome. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes because that's valuable information. I'm going to be getting a copy of that book because the reviews on it were great. If people, you check out his website, you'll see the reviews on it. It's easy. That's what I kept seeing on a lot of those reviews. It is so easy. And we need that today. We don't need to complicate our lives. Let's keep it easy, keep it simple.
Yeah.
So Benjy, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for, giving our audience the insight you've given us. Really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for being guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. And I hope you have a great day. I just want to say thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad to be able to share this.
Thank you, Benjy. Appreciate it.
Awesome.